In Ian Watson's Inquisitor, later republished as Draco, the opening volume of the Inquisition War trilogy, the audience between Inquisitor Jack Draco and the Emperor of Mankind remains one of the most unsettling portrayals of the Master of Mankind ever committed to print. It predates much of the modern Horus Heresy materials, and its tone reflects an earlier era of Warhammer 40,000's development, yet it continues to resonate because of a single deeply uncomfortable implication. When Draco approaches the Golden Throne and enters into a psychic communion, the entity that responds does not speak as a singular I, it speaks as we, and those voices do not harmonize, they argue. Before we begin, the best way to help us keep creating videos is to become a channel member down below, where you'll get access to new videos early. You can become a channel member for just $1 a month and we'll never ask you for anything else. Any support helps us immensely to keep creating for you, and as a promise and a thank you, we'll keep creating daily content for you. The scene unfolds not just as a conventional audience, but as a visionary intrusion. Draco, having maneuvered through labyrinthine politics and survived impossible circumstance, is granted access to the throne room on Terra. The physical Emperor is described as a corpse-like figure, skeletal and radiant, sustained by machinery and arcane technology, and this depiction is broadly consistent with later canonical material. The Emperor's body is withered, sustained upon the Golden Throne, his life maintained by mechanisms that are equal parts technological and esoteric, but the physical description is secondary to the psychic encounter that follows. When Draco's mind brushes against the Emperor's presence, he does not encounter a unified paternal sovereign. Instead, he experiences a multiplicity. The Emperor's consciousness appears stratified into aspects, distant voices representing different facets of will, reason, anger, hope, and despair. These aspects refer to themselves collectively as we, and they debate. They question Draco's worth. They argue about how to respond. The tone is not serene or omniscient, it is fractured. Now, it must be acknowledged that Draco originates from a formative period of Warhammer 40,000's lore, when the cosmology was less rigidly codified. Ian Watson's interpretation of the Emperor leans heavily into the metaphysical abstraction and psychological symbolism. Later authors, particularly within the Horus Heresy series, refine and in some respects constrain the Emperor's characterization, but nevertheless the core concept introduced in Draco, that the Emperor's consciousness has become plural, finds unsettling echoes in the modern canon. In Godblight by Guy Haley, Rabute Guilliman's psychic communion with the Emperor presents a being whose presence is overwhelming and multifaceted. Guilliman does not hear literal bickering voices, but he perceives layers of intention and perspective that do not resolve neatly into a single personality. The Emperor appears as an amalgam of drives and purposes, some compassionate, some coldly strategic, and Guilliman struggles to parse it. He leaves the encounter shaken, unsure whether he has truly conversed with his father or with an impersonal force wearing his father's face. When I first revisit Draco in light of the Siege of Terra material, I was struck by how prescient that earlier depiction feels. The Emperor in The End and the Death by Dan Abnett undergoes a kind of internal partitioning during his confrontation with Horus. Faced with the temptation of apotheosis into the so-called Dark King, he deliberately sheds aspects of himself, compassion, restraint, hesitation, to avoid being subsumed into godhood. And that act of psychic self-amputation implies that the Emperor's consciousness is not static, but modular. If he can excise elements of himself in a moment of crisis, it stands to reason that 10,000 years of continuous strain upon the Golden Throne might further fracture or stratify his psyche. The Golden Throne is not merely a life support device. As established in the Master of Mankind, it is a psychic regulator, a conduit, a weapon, and a barrier. The Emperor's mind is extended through it, holding shut the Webray breach beneath Terra and sustaining the Astronomicon. To perform these functions simultaneously for millennia would require a degree of cognitive compartmentalization beyond anything human. The Emperor may well have divided his consciousness into functional strata, one aspect maintaining the beacon, another restraining the demonic incursion, another perhaps observing the Imperium's spiritual development through the warp. In such a state, the singular I may have dissolved into a collective we. And there is also the matter of worship. During the Great Crusade, the Emperor rejected divinity. He sought to suppress religion, viewing it as a vector for warp corruption. After his internment upon the throne, the Imperium gradually transformed into a theocratic empire that venerates him as the God Emperor. In the warp, belief has power. Sustained devotion from trillions of minds over 10 millennia would inevitably shape the psychic reflection of the Emperor's presence. If he once existed as a single extraordinary potent human soul, he now exists as the focal point of an entire species' faith. It is conceivable that this faith has fed back into him, creating new aspects aligned with the archetype of a god of humanity. In Draco, the arguing voices suggest internal disagreement. This is not the serene omniscience of a transcendent deity. It is the discord of competing priorities. One aspect may embody ruthless necessity, another residual empathy, another long-term strategy. The Emperor of the Great Crusade was already capable of extreme compartmentalization. He concealed the Webway project, manipulated the Primarchs, and orchestrated galactic campaigns with chilling pragmatism. The pluralization in Draco can be read not as a contradiction of that character, but as its ultimate extrapolation. Under sufficient strain, the mind that once balanced countless calculations internally may now externalize those balances as distinct psychic voices. It is important, however, not to treat Draco as straightforward reportage. The scene is filtered through Jack Draco's perception. He is a powerful inquisitor, but he is still human, and he is entering communion with a being whose psychic magnitude dwarfs his own. The multiplicity he perceives may reflect the limitations of his own cognition as much as the Emperor's true state. When confronted with something too vast to comprehend, the mind divides it into interpretable components. Draco may experience the Emperor's layered consciousness as argumentative voices, because that is the only framework available to him. And yet I cannot dismiss this image. The idea of the Emperor reduced or perhaps evolved into a council of internal selves feels thematically consistent with the Imperium's trajectory. The Emperor once sought unity through rationalism and control. Now he presides over a fractured empire sustained by dogma and sacrifice. The plural we mirrors that fragmentation. It suggests that the Emperor's own internal coherence has mirrored the Imperium's external disunity. And there is also a darker interpretation. We know that the warp is not a neutral medium. 10,000 years of continuous exposure, even for a being of the Emperor's magnitude, would have consequences. While there is no canonical evidence that he has ever been corrupted in a conventional sense, the possibility that warp resonance has altered his internal architecture cannot be dismissed outright. In the end and the death, the potential for him to become the Dark King demonstrates that his soul is capable of catalyzing godhood. Though he rejects that path, the conditions that allowed it do not vanish. The Emperor upon the throne exists at the boundary between mortal and divine. A plural consciousness may be the natural state of a being, occupying that liminal space. When those aspects of the Emperor debate Draco's fate, there is an implication that decision-making is no longer instantaneous. The Emperor does not simply will a course of action into being, he weighs it, he argues with himself, and that suggests either limitation or complexity, or both. The omnipotent sovereign of imperial myth would not need to deliberate internally. The fractured entity upon the throne might. And I sometimes wonder whether the we is less a sign of weakness and more a reflection of scale. A human speaks as I because human consciousness is bounded and singular. A being whose awareness spans a galaxy, who perceives multiple timelines and probabilities simultaneously, might naturally adopt a plural. The argument between aspects may not be discord but parallel processing, perceived as a disagreement by a lesser mind. What Draco interprets as bickering could be the visible edge of an unimaginably vast calculus. Nevertheless, the emotional tone of the scene remains disquieting. There is no warmth, no paternal reassurance. The Emperor's presence is alien, distant, and internally divided, and that aligns uncomfortably well with Guilliman's later experience. The Emperor still acts, still exerts influence, but he no longer presents as a singular father figure. He is something broader, colder, and more diffuse. The enduring relevance of the Draco depiction lies in its refusal to simplify the Emperor's condition. It does not present him as a stable, suffering martyr. It presents him as altered, fragmented, perhaps even multiplied. Modern canon, while more restrained, has not invalidated that interpretation. If anything, it has provided structural explanation for how such fragmentation could occur. Psychic self-amputation during the duel with Horus, millennia of throne-bound exertion, and the cumulative weight of universal worship. The Emperor who speaks to Draco is not the warlord of the Great Crusade. He is the product of defeat, endurance, and transformation. He is sustained by machinery and sacrifice, extended through the warp as beacon and barrier. If he now speaks as we, it may be because the singular self that once guided humanity no longer exists in that form. Whether that represents decay, evolution, or a necessary adaptation to the impossible burden remains unresolved. And perhaps it must remain so, because any definitive answer would collapse the ambiguity that defines the Imperium's relationship with its silent, many-voiced God. If you'd like to support the channel, please like and hype the video in the comment section below, subscribe, and check back for daily videos. The best way to help us keep creating videos is to become a channel member down below, where you'll get access to new videos early. You can become a member for just $1 a month, and we'll never ask you for anything else. Any support helps us immensely to keep creating for you. This archive has now been fully decoded. Continue your journey with the video displayed on screen. The vast wealth of the archives continues to reveal new knowledge of the dark history of the 40k verse. In the grim dark of the far future, there is only war.